День, прошу вас, пане Анатолію. Так. Зараз хвилиночку.
We'll start in a minute. We continue our work. I'm Olga Atamanova, and today in our studio we have the mayor of the city of Bucha, Anatoliy Fedoruk. Anatoliy, you're welcome, and I'd like to ask you to tell us about Bucha. Now, we all see that in the recent weeks, this town, Bucha, has been on the first pages of world media. We have all seen the brutality of Russian army in this town. So could you please tell us about the situation there? Maybe first about the crimes committed there, and then about the restoration of the city at the moment. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. So, good afternoon, dear journalists. We have just heard this introduction that the city of Bucha, its territorial community, has been on the central media for 9 days. Of course, I, as a city mayor, would like to see it in peaceful Ukraine, in peaceful Bucha. And there would be different circumstances and reasons for you to cover our town, completely different ones. But we have the situation that we have. Unfortunately, my town and residents of my town have been tortured a lot by the Russian aggressors. And by today, we have already had 403 dead bodies, which have been brutally killed, tortured and killed. There are respective procedures in place carried out by the authorities under close attention from mass media and international experts who, within the framework of the current law, interact with the Ukrainian authorities. Today at 10 a.m. We started opening the second mass grave. There are 56 bodies, plus there are 4 private graves. But I'd like to repeat that today we already have 403 bodies. And taking into account that our armed forces, our sappers, minesweepers, work in forests between villages and settlements in our territorial community, we hope that those people who have been missing are still alive, but most probably will find their bodies somewhere between those villages in those forests, because local residents from Uzbekistan, Babelsi, Lubyanka, Azera, in those villages, residents saw that those Russian enemies, their uniformed agencies, took them and brought them to those forest areas. Now, the relevant utilities in our city, including our local utilities, continue renewal of our infrastructure. We have managed to clean almost all roads, paths. We have managed to remove those remainings of armed vehicles. We have been cleaning our town, preparing it for peaceful life, for the return of our citizens, our residents. Traditionally, this year on the 24th of April, we'll have the traditional day where we Ukrainians traditionally remember our dead, and it's our tradition to clean our home, to clean our towns and villages, and we have been working on that. There has been a coordination meeting in Oblast administration where we discussed how different entities have been working, including private companies, DTEC, provincial natural gas supply company, and others have been reported and established their plans. And we plan that until the 17th of April, we'll already have stable electricity supply in our town, and so we'll also have water supply and sewage working. And Oblast, our province natural gas supply company, plans to supply gas at a stable pressure during this week, so that in our peaceful Bucha, our residents would get those proper conditions, comfortable conditions, if you can say so, relatively comfortable conditions to cook at least something. That's briefly it, and I'm ready to switch to Q&A, because, you know, I have been told that there will be 30 minutes at most, but I'll try. Anatoly, I cannot but ask you, recently, I think yesterday, there was information from our ombudsman, Lyudmila Denisova, Ukrainian ombudsman, and we all saw that she told us about 25 women and girls who have been raped in Bucha. Have you any information about those facts? Indeed, the ombudsman, human rights ombudsman, have visited Bucha 3 times. First time just to see the situation in general, and 2 other visits were working visits with our specialists, with our utilities. Initially, there was not a lot of information, but then they started investigating. And now I can just confirm what you have mentioned, but if I may, I will not go into details now, although I do have some details, but still, you know, it's private information for everybody, especially for women who live in Bucha, and they will continue living in Bucha. So let us be correct and careful and cautious, because you understand the reasons. Okay, Anatoly, another question is about destruction. We all see people returning to Bucha, and some of them return and they publish shocking videos and pictures of what they have seen in their homes. What sort of information you currently have about the destruction there in the town? If we compare, say, in terms of percentage of destruction, if we compare Borodyanka against Bucha, Makarev against Bucha, or Irpin against Bucha, our percentage of general big destruction has been a bit lower. We have had 22 multiple-story residential buildings destroyed, but there are 2 more buildings, 9-story buildings, which cannot be restored. We already got some expert opinions, and we have been considering dismantling those. And there are also 243 private houses, which have also been pretty much 100% destroyed, or the percentage of their destruction is so high that they just have to be dismantled. No way to restore them. Not to mention the destruction, damage made to windows, floors, roofs, because all these things can be restored or repaired. But the worst thing is that there's almost no one apartment, no one multiple-story building where Russian enemies would not leave their trace. They stole something, they entered, they stole, they left their traces there, their signs. And for those people who have not been under occupation by invaders, it's quite difficult for them to accept it. And you're right, people have been just shocked by that wild, brutal behavior by Russian military, which they have seen in their homes. I would like to use this opportunity to address our citizens who have been in safe places where they have been accommodated in a friendly way, both in Ukraine and abroad. At the moment, it's too early to return to your homes. The city has been patrolled by the national police, by special uniformed agencies, by local volunteer teams. There is proper law and order maintained. There is no marauder activities. There are just some cases, and in most cases probably just because of some misunderstanding. So don't worry. You may feel safe about your property, but unfortunately, you will be shocked with what you will see in your homes. You will remember Russian occupiers for a long time. Thank you for this information, Anatoly. Dear journalists, you can ask your questions. Please use the microphone, and please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Ilario of the Italian TV Rai. Maybe I came here too late, but if we can have some more clarity about the victims, about the number of the victims. You mentioned that you are now opening a second mass grave with 67 bodies. The other mass grave, I believe, contained 40-something bodies. So if we can be more, if you can be more accurate in telling us how did you come up with this 403 corpses? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Actually, on the 1st and 2nd of April, we were already able to make certain list of those bodies we collected in the streets, or there were bodies who were in hospitals. There were two officials, as requested by Russian occupiers, they had to go around the streets and bring bodies to the church. So we say that there are 56 bodies in the second grave, 56 in the second grave. On the total, we currently have, as of today, we have officially confirmed 403 bodies, and unfortunately this number is growing, still growing, because, there is police, there is military, there are all those agencies who check quarter by quarter, building by building, apartment by apartment, and they find bodies also in private territory. They see some graves. They find graves, so we dig into those graves. We do the exhumation of those bodies, and we send them to be identified, to establish who are those citizens and what are the circumstances. So by now we have had 403 dead bodies in the city of Bucha. You're welcome.
Yes, hi, this is Federica Bianchi from the Italian magazine L'Espresso. I've been talking to several people in Bucha and also to some sources from the military. And oh yeah, thank you, it's much better. And it seems like you were not in Bucha during the occupation, and also you might have some ties with the Russian occupiers. Can you please explain where you have been, when you got out of town of Bucha, when you came back, and what you did during the month that Bucha has been occupied? Thank you.
Дякую.
Well, I already answered to Ukrainska Pravda publication and Ukrainian authorities. I explained to relevant authorities what I was doing since the 24th of February, since the very first day of the war and until liberation. I was in the town, and with my community, I was there during the whole this period of occupation. And all that brutality committed by the Russian military in our town, I have seen them to some extent and felt them. I was witnessing killing, shooting of an innocent civilian when there was a Citroen car moving from Melniki near Yushtepla Energomontaj company. It was shooted, and the woman with child was wounded, and her husband asked Russians to let them live, but the Russian soldier decided to kill them finally.
Мікрофон, будь ласка.
Where were you living? Where were you hiding? I mean, people explain how they lived during these 30 days.
Well, if you're interested in those details, my first location where I was hiding was like a forced one because Dmitrievka, the village of Dmitrievka was on the 3rd of March. I was with 5 of my colleagues, and in 3 cars we went there. There was mega market, supermarket in Dmitrievka. We had to transport some items there. We understood that we will have to bake bread, and we would need some margarine and wheat flour and yeast. And former Vice Prime Minister Gennady Zubko called me when he read my message and he contacted the owner of Mega Market, and they proposed that we come. And there had another bus from city of Chernivtsi had to come to bring those foodstuffs. We loaded it. We were shelled, but on the way back to Bucha, there was that turn near that lake, at the intersection between Warsaw and Bucha, and we entered the private quarters, private buildings, and one of the citizens living in that area, who was at the checkpoint of that self-defense, he stopped us. He didn't allow us to go further. He said that further there are Russian military already on Klozavetska Street. So we entered the private quarters, we scattered there, and we spent 4 days at 118A Sklozovetska Street. There was family of Rebchun who accommodated us, two of us, and other 3 people remained in another 2-story building where there was a semi-basement. We realized that there was already checking of those quarters, and Yablonska Street by the 3rd of March was already occupied and cut off from Kyiv and Irpin. We knew it, so we decided that staying there would be too dangerous both for us and for those people, our hosts. So we decided that we would move to the center of the town. In 3 steps, in 3 stages, through railway, through residential quarter, through 2 quarters, we reached the central part of the town, and there were already Russian military feeling like at home there. There was a large number of people near the hospital and the mayor's office. People came there to get medicines, to get foodstuffs, and they asked whether there would be those green corridors for evacuation. So for another 2 days or 2 days and a half, there was an opportunity for those innocent civilians to live with those white stripes. Although there were already some bodies in the streets, there were some, they were shooting in the streets. And the last 3 green corridors, so-called green corridors, but they were also unsafe, but at least those buses who came to the city of Bucha provided an opportunity to evacuate. It was possible to live both in buses and in private cars in between those buses. And a lot of citizens, a lot of residents left in those 3 stages. Of course, it was dangerous. It was absolutely dangerous. You remember a situation when there was that Ukrainian Red Cross car which was shooted. The car that accompanied, they were accompanying that convoy, evacuation convoy. So, in fact, I have faced Russian military about 13th of March, when the very last humanitarian convoy, so-called humanitarian convoy, left with those civilians. I sent my deputy, the secretary of town council, and my deputy. I persuaded them that it's too dangerous for us, all of us, to stay in the town. We were developing various plans where to hide, in which quarters, in which building, but we all realized that if they find us, 4 or 5 young people, I'm the oldest and they're younger, so for them, for Russians, we would be just some sort of award to get new rank. They would report that they got these people, us. So I managed to persuade my colleagues to leave the town. They listened to me. I came home and took some things with me. I did what I should do with the telephone, because, it's about geolocation, about coordinates of those checkpoints and weapons and whatever, so, or artillery, from which quarter they are shelled, especially they were shelled, especially our military was interested in where Russian Buk missiles are located and all that. So I left everything home. I took just not a lot of things, some chattels, some foodstuffs, and I moved to my friend Vitaly Kosenko at Shevchenko Street. And I proposed that he would allow me to stay in his place. In an hour, when there was a need to recharge my Nokia phone, and there was no charger, because that's an old Nokia phone, I decided to come back to my apartment. That's about 1 hour or 1 hour and 20 minutes after that. I didn't have a key from my outer door, so I jumped over the fence. At that moment, a Russian soldier came and brought me into that building, into their building. They just entered. Back then, they had just entered because I thought that they were looking for everything, like opening cases and everything. I asked them, I was asked whether I'm the owner of that building. If you're interested, I'll tell you. I answered to them that, of course, I would like to be the owner of this building, but I just stayed here because there was an older lady and I have to help her. I have been supporting 4 buildings. I showed them what are those buildings. He asked me who else lives in those buildings in this street. I explained that in each and every building there are at least 1 or 2 persons who cannot evacuate, so they stay in the city, in the town. Then that Russian soldier asked me whether I served in the military. I answered that yes, I did. He became very cautious and he even took his assault a rifle in the battle position. He was an officer because he has a pistol with him. I explained that yes, I had my military service back in Soviet times in Far East. It was in Soviet Army in Far East military district. Then that Russian officer became a bit quieter. He asked me a bit about my passport. I told him who would carry passports with them in the town. Then he explained that now it's required to always have passport. And he asked me to accompany him to my apartment, and that's about like 200 meters maximum. So I was going and he was going behind me, and luckily somebody called him on the radio and he told me stop. I stopped. Then he asked me again where I live, and I said it's like 500, 700 meters from here. And then he said, if you're to support this area, take your passport and we will be waiting for you. Of course, after I left him, I went there and took my passport and everything I needed and moved to a completely different location, which is Melniki. That was an area of private gardens, and there all the doors and gates were already destroyed. The Russians had already checked it, and then I stayed there. And Kasenka's family came there because first we decided that I would be in a different place, but it was impossible to get to that other place because of checkpoints. So Kasenka family came and took me to their place, and we went to the hostel, and then on the way, and then I stayed with Kasenka family in Shevchenko Street. So we established communications with residents of Novoyablinska, of Lysova Bucha, of Sklozovodska Street. So we maintained communications because from time to time it was possible to get some mobile coverage when you leave the building. So it was, floating. It worked and then it didn't. So that's the situation, that's the story. Thank you, Anatoly. Thank you. Any more questions? You're welcome.
TV9 Bharatvarsh. My question is that you've mentioned 403 corpses as of now that have been found. Are there more missing people reports also? And is this the total figure of people who have died, or is the number is more than this? And also, how many women, men, and children?
Well, I'll start from the end of your question, if I may. To be honest, I don't have the information how many women, how many children, how many elder people. To be honest, if you need that information, I will clarify and provide you with this information for you have all the information, because we already have 163 people identified where we clearly understand who are those people, where they lived, where they worked, when, on which date they were born, and so on. Whether those numbers are final, no, I don't think so. I think those numbers will increase. Unfortunately, it will increase because in the city of Bucha there are still 4 residential quarters which have to be checked, and bodies have to be found. They have been buried or they just are in some buildings. Every day, for example, today at 9 a.m., jointly with law enforcement, we had an extended meeting, and part of that meeting, that discussion was precisely about this, because neighbors already write to us that you can smell it, because there are those dead bodies there. It means that there are some dead bodies there in that building, in that apartment. At the moment, we have this number, because we have our call center working in the town, and their neighbors and relatives in Bucha and outside, they call us, they submit their requests, and we already have information about 16 people have been missing, and we don't have information about them. Maybe they're alive. We hope, and their relatives hope and want to see them alive, but for a long period of time, a long time has passed, and their relatives say that they don't contact them. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Hassan Masoud from TV Al Jazeera. I want to ask about the demining process, since we are hearing about news about people that they are going back to their homes and finding mines there. What is the situation in Bucha? Thank you so much.
When I'm saying that our town has been switching to peaceful mode of life, one of the required preconditions is demining. Indeed, I don't recommend people, especially in private buildings, to enter those. First of all, demining was done in carried out in critical infrastructure sites, which have to be restored. There are big areas, huge areas, especially those where there was artillery, where there were tanks in the trenches and other weapons between Bucha, Morotsky, Nemeshaevo, Vorzel, and around Blistovica, the closest areas to us, as well as Zdvizhivka and Babince. There was their second or third line. I'm not ready to say for precisely whether that was second or third line, but there is a lot of mines. And today, this morning in Bucha, and right now in Oblast military administration, at that meeting, we were discussing it, and we emphasized that there is still a lot of mined areas around villages and towns. For this reason, we categorically prohibit residents from entering forests or fields where Russian occupiers were located. But we continue this work because, how could you guarantee safety for residents? How can we let them return if we are not sure that their buildings, their places are safe? Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Hello, I'm Viktor Ivleva from Crimean Tatar ATR TV. I have 3 questions. Do you imagine more or less approximately the cost of restoration of Bucha? Did you try to calculate it? This is one thing. Second, when will there be electricity supply or gas supply in those buildings of those residents who survived for this terrible month and they are still cooking in their backyards? And my third question is about that mass grave in the church courtyard. This is the the best known mass grave as far as I understand. There have been 2 exhumations that I visited, and in the total there have been 44 bodies found there. Do you understand who has been buried in that church courtyard? And as far as I understand, those are not only people who were killed, but also just sick people who were dying in the hospital, and it was not possible to bury them in a normal human way, as we usually do it. Are there any lists of those people? Thank you. If I may, I will start about your last question, because, it's about people who have been brutally killed and tortured. And I have to say, to clarify something. In that mass grave, everybody had some bullet wounds in that first grave. In the second grave, which is being exhumed now next to St. Andrew's Church, there were civilians buried who died, who were in the morgue. They had to be buried because there was no electricity, and people had to start burying them there. So 56 bodies in the second grave would include innocent civilians who died, as you now emphasized in your question. But what is the percentage there? We'll see it. All the other bodies that we collected around the city, first in cemetery in Deputatska Street, and then there were bodies we collected from streets and pedestrian pathways. We took those bodies and sent them to the central morgue in the city of Kyiv when we could. And that's how I've already told you, there have been 403 bodies of people who were killed and who died in Bucha. About the restoration of Bucha, of course, based on orders and our own willingness to understand the scale of the destruction, we have been calculating and investigating. It's quite difficult currently to quote any numbers. We follow the state construction standards in force in Kyiv and Kyiv Oblast, including those quarters. And I think that in 2 or 3 days, we already have some understanding about the social infrastructure, how much it would take, critical infrastructure, which is about utilities and about life. The most needed utilities, and multiple story buildings. It's more difficult about private houses because there are different houses and it's difficult to calculate the cost. But we have been working towards those results. We have been publishing the results, and it's very nice to see that Kyiv Forensic Institute joined those activities. They have experts, knowledgeable experts, who have been providing some estimates, not just some general estimates of damages, but they also estimate whether certain facilities can be restored or they should be completely dismantled. And we appreciate that. And there was also a question about electricity. And yeah, I already answered for electricity. The date which was quoted by the local authorities and approved by the local authorities, by the mayor's office and Oblast administration, is the 17th of April. 17th of April is the latest date when DTEC company, based on the amount of damage, they guarantee that they will do it by the 17th of April. We want to believe it. But currently, I have good news for those living in Bucha, that our hospital already doesn't use diesel generator anymore. They have already got electricity supply to that central hospital. In the mayor's office, where we have our humanitarian hub in the territory of the school gymnasium, they also have electricity supply, and there are also drinking water reservoirs with 4 wells, and also they have received electricity supply, and now they have been working and powering water into those reservoirs, those tanks, and we are now preparing to get this water to water supply network. Small news, but they give us some hope that we will be able to gradually restore our infrastructure. Of course, it's very good to see that city of Kyiv has provided some equipment. Brovary district, Boryspil district, town of Vishneva, they provided equipment and personnel for us to bring our towns and villages into order. Thank you. Any more questions? You're welcome.
Antonio Pita from El País newspaper in Spain. I have 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned the missing people that might be found in the nearby forests. I would like to know which is the estimate of missing people right now. And on the second hand, I know you don't want to elaborate on that group of 25 women, but I would like to know if there are any other allegations of sexual violence in Bucha that you're aware of. Thank you.
Dear journalists, please listen more carefully, because I already said there were questions, and I already answered that at the moment our call center of the city council received information about 16 missing people, and during 1 month their relative, no, I'm not complaining, but sorry, but I'm just saying that for 1 month their relatives cannot contact them, and we do hope that that those people are just hiding, that they were just unable to contact their relatives, that they're alive. But most probably, unfortunately, most probably they will be also dead like those 403 people whom we already know we lost. Now about your second question about rape. Again, I already commented, and I'll just tell you about one cruel example, very cruel, brutal example. There was children sanatorium in Warsaw, and its guard was also tortured and raped. The guard, the male, the man who was a guard there, and he died. He died. He's not alive anymore, so I can quote this case now. He was raped and killed. You're welcome with questions.
My name is Arthur de Portere, Belgian journalist, freelance. I would like to know if it's possible to access the people who are digging the grave in Bucha. I was wondering if those are professional people working in cemetery or civilians helping to dig those graves, and if it would be possible to access them and to feel them and interview them and to tell the story of Bucha through their eyes.
Thank you for your question. We are open to the maximum extent. We were open to the maximum extent before the war, before the invasion. Now we are open for journalist community, for the whole civilized world. What we are doing, how we are doing it, we have been informing everybody, we have been showing. So if you want, you or your colleagues want, according to your accreditation procedures, because you know we have war in the country, you are welcome to come to Bucha. Thank God, you know, Warsaw Highway M07 now works. The bridge over Irpin River has been destroyed, but you can go there. I came here via Dmitrievka village, for example, and you can come to Bucha, and when bodies are taken from that grave, when this grave is dug, you can be present there, and before that procedure, during that procedure, when we bury those people. And now, you know, with all these things, we don't think about something, but maybe it was not the right time to think about it. But today, my colleague, the mayor of Kyiv, called me and asked me, what should I bring to your town? And there was, you know, a silence for 3 minutes when I said that I need at least 300 coffins, wooden coffins with crosses, with all those ritual items to bury people in those coffins, because we were not ready for such big number. In objective terms, we were not ready to have so many dead bodies. Any more questions? You're welcome. Last question. Yeah, if I may, I will leave. Anatoliy, thank you very much for coming here, for what you're doing. From RAI Italian TV, could you please tell us, there was information that the Russians would often, in many places, they would hide their crimes. I heard it about Mariupol, and also I heard information about Bucha and Hostomel. In particular, we heard about those mobile crematoriums that they were using. Can you tell us anything about it? Do you know anything about those mobile crematoriums? Have you heard anything about it? You know, to be honest, I ask myself the same question and answer it the way, you know, you mentioned it now. Yes, they have those crematoriums, because after such large-scale shelling, you know, when Ukrainian armed forces shelled them between Bucha and Blistavitsa, they hit them. And I just came there with our military, with our minesweepers. I was interested in seeing the bodies of those Russians, see them. And there are no bodies, so they would hide their traces. You probably have seen photos from Vokzalna Street. Those in Vokzalna Street, you know, in 2.5 hours or 3 hours after after there was that combat action, after artillery hit there, in 2.5 hours to 3 hours, we came there to see what happened there, because immediately we got information that there is a lot of ruins. We understand that when there is artillery, definitely there are civilian people, but all civilian people were alive because they were in basements. There are old village buildings, and there are some primitive basements, but strong ones, strong shelters. But we found bodies of those people, of those Russians who were in their armored personnel carriers, and the Russians did not take their bodies. It was towards Vodoprovidna and Nazary Yaremchuk Street. They're in kitchen gardens, and the Russians didn't take those bodies of their soldiers. And we found 4 bodies. They're terrible things. We buried them, but we buried them separately near the church, so that in the future those, you know, they're all humans, so we buried them, and there are those 4 bodies that Russians didn't take with them. And there were 2 wounded people wounded in the first days. Those Russian soldiers received medical aid by our ambulance. Our ambulance brought them, and they got medical assistance in our central city hospital, and now they're kept by our security services. Then they took them. I don't know about their further fate. Probably, you know, maybe they will be exchanged, but I don't know. So probably, yeah, you're right that, you know, it cannot be that after such after such artillery shelling by Ukrainian armed forces, you know, there are broken Russian vehicles, everything is broken, and there are no dead bodies. So yeah, we have questions about it. You see, finally, you see how they provide information in their domestic Russian market. They say that they're just some not thousands, but just some people, while actually thousands and tens of thousands of Russian soldiers died here. And maybe they were utilized, the bodies were utilized the way you mentioned with crematoriums. Thank you, Anatoliy. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for what all you're doing. Now we let you go. Yeah, thank you. You know, I would like to really, really thank you as a human being, as a man. I'd like to thank every journalist working in Ukraine, covering these events, because for us it is important. It is extremely important for the whole world to see and hear this information, to finally understand what this war in Ukraine is about. It's not a conflict about Ukraine and Russia. It's actually a full-scale Third World War, carried out in the way Russia is used to do it, be it in Moldova, in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Transcaucasian country. Everywhere they try to do it in that way. You know, they enter and they do something. If they succeed in Ukraine, then there will be Poland, there will be other countries. We should prevent it from happening. Thank you for being with us. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. I'd like to remind you that now we are preparing our schedule for tomorrow. Please monitor our announcements, subscribe to our channel. Thank you and goodbye.